Okay, today in pre-cal we talked about transformations of functions. We talked about the linear function, the quadratic, the cubic, the square root, and the absolute value. We talked about the transformations you can make to those. Some of those transformations, like in part A, would be a vertical shift, where if c, any number, is positive, and it's being added to a function, so some function and it has a plus c on the end, it's shifted up. If it has a minus c on the end, it's shifted down. So in this case, if you look right here, we have x squared plus 2. The parent function is the quadratic. Adding 2 to the end, so it's shifted up by 2. On number 2, it's the absolute value function. Notice that I didn't make any note of the h of x or g of x. That's just describing the function. The h and g don't mean anything at all. Just think of that as y. So it's the absolute value, and then minus 4. Since the minus 4 is outside the parentheses, we know it's moved down by 4. So again, a positive on the outside of a parentheses is moved up, and a negative is moved down. Inside the parentheses is a horizontal shift. If c is positive, then inside the parentheses, if it's x minus c, it's shifted to the right, which is probably kind of opposite of what you think. Then if it's added inside the parentheses, it's shifted left. So let's just review that real quick. Here's my x-axis. If I'm adding a number, I'm moving to the left. If I'm subtracting a number, I'm moving to the right. So that's kind of weird, because that's kind of opposite of what you think. Anything that's a horizontal change is usually opposite of what you think. So in this case, we have the quadratic function, which just any old function. It's being added by 3 inside of parentheses, so it's shifted to the left 3. And when I say shifted, I mean the original starting place is shifted left. 0, 0 is now at negative 3, 0. Okay, for this one, it is shifted right by 1. Hopefully you can see that because it's being subtracted. So now it's going to go through the point 1, 0. The next thing we talked about was reflection. A reflection is a flip over the x or y axis. If there's a negative in front of the function, it's over the x-axis, and a negative inside the function or a negative inside the parentheses, it's over the y-axis. Let's look at some examples. On number 5, this is to the 4th power, which acts a lot like a quadratic. It's a negative in front and there are no parentheses, so this one is reflected over the x-axis. On the next one, we have the square root of negative x. This acts like a parenthesis inside, so it's reflected over the y-axis. The difference would be if there was a negative outside the square root, that would be over the x again. So inside parentheses is reflected over the y-axis, outside over the x-axis. The last two types of transformations are shrink and stretch. The first type is vertical, the second is horizontal. So here if we talk about the vertical stretch or shrink, if c is greater than 1 or a whole number, then it's a stretch. And think of that as someone getting taller, or a function getting taller. If c is less than 1, meaning it's a fraction or a decimal between 1 and 0, it is a shrink. Think of that as someone getting shorter. In the first example, that number 7, the parent function is the absolute value function, and it's being multiplied by a c. Multiplied on the outside means it's a vertical stretch or shrink. It's a whole number, so it's a stretch. So a vertical stretch by 3. On the second one, it also is absolute value. That's just coincidence. It's again going to be a vertical shrink this time. Vertical though, because it's being multiplied on the outside. Vertical shrink by 1/3. So it's going to get shorter by a rate of 1/3. If we look on the back side of our notes, we talk about the horizontal stretch and shrink. Remember I said earlier, anything horizontal is opposite of what you think. So here, the c is being multiplied inside parentheses. So if there's something in front of the x being multiplied inside of parentheses, it's a horizontal stretch or shrink. If it is a whole number, number greater than 1, then it is a shrink. Think of that as someone who's getting fatter. If it is a inside the parentheses and it's being multiplied by c, it's a stretch if it is a fraction. And think of that as getting skinnier. Okay? In this case, this 2 right here doesn't do anything, neither does the negative. And when I say it doesn't do anything, it does do something. This is going to shift it up 2. This is going to reflect it over the x-axis. But what I'm really concerned about is what is this? Is it a stretch or a shrink? It's being multiplied on the inside of parentheses, so it is a horizontal stretch or shrink. It's a whole number, so it is a shrink. It's getting fatter, so a horizontal shrink by 2. You do want to list horizontal or vertical shrink or stretch. On the number 10, it's again a cubic. That's just coincidence. It's being multiplied by 1/2. Multiplication means a stretch or a shrink. Inside parentheses means it's horizontal, and it's a horizontal stretch, by 1/2 until it's the end of the day. Okay, part F, this is what your homework is going to be like. We're just putting it all together, so we want to identify the parent function, describe the transformations, and sketch it. I made kind of a big deal in class about you being able to sketch this on your own without looking directly at your calculator. On the test, you may have a section that is a non-calculator section, so you'll need to be able to sketch this to some degree without a calculator. Alright, part A. List the parent function. So f of x equals negative 3x plus 2. You'll notice that the highest power is 1, so the parent function here is the linear parent function. The transformations. I've got a negative in front, no parentheses, so it's reflected over the x-axis. I'm multiplying by 3, again no parentheses, so it's a vertical stretch by 3. And I'm adding 2 to the end, so it's shifted up by 2. Now that I've got my 3 transformations, and it can be 1, it could be 10 transformations, or it could be 5 transformations really. But I've got my 3 that were listed in this one, and now I want to sketch this. So when we go to sketch, we're going to start by sketching the original parent function. There it is. Now we're going to reflect it over the x-axis, so that would make it, this section goes here, this section goes here. Stretch by 3, which means its slope is getting steeper. And then it's moved up 2. So what did go through 0, 0, now goes through 0, 2. And I can go ahead and draw that line. Notice I showed each transformation as I moved along. I want you to be able to do that as well. I do want to sketch. Notice I didn't put a lot of details in here, but something just like this would not be significant enough. Especially that would clue me in that you're just using the calculator. You need to do a little better than that on the homework. Okay, this last example, our parent function is the cubic function, so we know that looks like that snake, so you guys like to call it. If I list my transformations, a number being multiplied on the outside is a vertical stretch by 4. We've got a 2 being added on the inside. Now, it's subtracting from that, but the 2 is positive. So when I've got a positive number being added on the inside, it is a shift to the left by 2. I've got a negative being multiplied by x, so I've got a reflection. And that will be over the y-axis. I'm having trouble with my spelling. I don't know what my deal is. I'm sorry. And then I have negative 3 on the end. That's outside parentheses, so this is shifted down by 3. Okay? Let's go ahead and make a sketch of this thing. Okay, starting point, my x cubed looks something like this. You should be familiar with that. If I stretch it by 4, it's going to get skinnier, right? Then it's going to move left 2. Then it's reflected over the y-axis, so it's going to switch directions and be in quadrants 1 and 4. And then it's shifted down 3. So this is my new spot. Instead of 0, 0, it's shifted down 3 here. And there is my new parent function, or my new function, excuse me, not parent. This one right here. And that was it. Today's homework assignment was A, number 9, and that was page 81. And you were supposed to do numbers 19 to 28, and 31 and 32. Sorry for the misspellings and the sleepy brain. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.